Be right back. Destroy is an independent podcast produced by Be Right Back Studios. Every episode is supported by our listeners on Patreon, including Tim O'Donnell and Roy Burns III. More information is available at patreon.com/destroypunkpodcast. The conversations on this show do not end with each episode. At shopdestroy.com, we curate an archive of books, records, prints, and related material connected to our guests and themes. More information is available at shopdestroy.com.
There are certain spiritual laws that are not man-made and cannot be man-made. And as you move through life, you learn what those laws are because they're intuitive to you. You're born with them.
Even if a work of literature or something you hear in song doesn't have that same governmental power, it still has cultural power and can get deployed in really unique ways that something like the law can't.
We need to look at how you change a culture, that we start to accept that people have different opinions, and that is different to discriminating against somebody.
The idea of meaning and humanity are completely invisible and lost.
Public safety within the building.
In the 1920s, if you were a rising film star, chances are you stayed at the St. Francis Hotel in downtown San Francisco. It was polished, expensive, and built for visibility, a place where Hollywood sold itself to the public. On September 5th, 1921, that image crumbled. At a Labor Day weekend soiree, the actress Virginia Rappe suffered a ruptured bladder after an incident with Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, then one of the most famous men in Hollywood. 4 days later, she died. Arbuckle was tried for manslaughter and acquitted, but the case ignited a national scandal. For newspapers, fundamentalists, and self-appointed guardians of public morality, it confirmed what they already feared. Hollywood was decadent, unruly, and needed to be reined in. The industry's answer was a man called William Harrison Hayes.
1,000 hands would like to burden pictures with propaganda. They shall not. Others would like to bring this great entertainment of yours under stifling and artificial domination. That you will not permit. You want entertainment. Wholesome, interesting, and vital. This the motion picture industry is pledged to provide.
Hayes was a former Postmaster General and Republican Party chairman, brought in to restore public trust. What followed was not just a cleanup campaign, but hardline regulations. By 1934, the Motion Picture Production Code was being strictly enforced across every aspect of American film. Its limitations were clinically precise. No sexual perversion, no interracial relationships, no profanity. Criminals could not be attractive, and adultery was never to be seen as acceptable. Above all, films had to uphold what the code called the correct standards of life.
Production code adopted by the motion picture industry is designed to develop and to protect. The code sets up high standards of performance for motion picture producers. It states the considerations which good taste and community value make necessary in this universal form of entertainment.
Audiences were to leave knowing that good was right and bad was wrong.
Respect for law, respect for every religion, respect for every race, and respect for every nation.
This was the landscape where 20th century dissent found its voice, and also how it was rendered manageable. As film gave way to broadcast, the rules were sharpened. Television inherited the code's logic, but played it back even more clinically. Language was filtered, reframed, and monitored. Elvis was shown from the waist up, just because his body said too much.
This is probably the greatest honor that I've ever had in my life.
By mid-century, public speech had become formulaic, neutralized. It was in this broadcast culture that figures such as Gil Scott-Heron intervened.
Everything that has developed that has been counter status quo, all of that spread from the initial activists who concerned themselves with the beginnings of the civil rights movement.
He declared the revolution would not be televised. He was not calling for exemption. He was naming a system where protest could be seen, but only as spectacle, and once it had been stripped of context.
On the fourth day of student protests at the University of Wisconsin, National Guardsmen today used limited tear gas to break up the picket line. Mike Pappas reports from Madison.
Television did not silence objection, it fed it back as entertainment. This is when the question is no longer how to be heard. It's whether the question of protest can exist at all.
And arrests at Columbia University. Here are the pictures. The NYPD, some officers in riot gear descending on Columbia, arresting dozens of pro-Palestinian.
My name is Richard Smith, and I'm your host.
You have to destroy in order to create.
Every era builds systems that decide what language is acceptable.
The streets of central Tunis are a battleground.
For decades, public institutions have faced repeated questions about their legitimacy.
Well, that is it. Brexit. The giant screens declare in red, white and blue, we're out. 11 o'clock on the 31st of January.
And huge demonstrations churned with the call for his removal.
The institutions change, but the logic never does.
The World Health Organization took a giant step today in declaring coronavirus a pandemic.
1 year ago today, America hit pause, and Wisconsin was just starting to feel the pandemic's impact.
Riot police armed mostly with tear gas against protesters.
As co-founder of Freedom in the Arts, Denise Fahmy has spent years working inside public organizations such as the Arts Council of Britain, witnessing the ramifications of institutional regulation.
You can see how policies and work cultures develop over time, and how sometimes that's a result of personnel and personalities. Sometimes it's a result of political pressure externally from government, and sometimes it's just the mechanics of bureaucracy start to push a certain agenda. Authoritative hierarchies are often just blundering along, but they must be held to account.
Movements like the protests in Hong Kong and the Arab Spring don't always share a single ideology, but they often produce the same institutional reflex: prevention.
People are very fearful. The fear of being vilified on social media.
For Fahmy, it's all about how institutional systems behave once risk assessment becomes the organizing principle. And when COVID arrived, this reflex hardened further.
So much change during that working at home period. People's fearfulness nearly doubled. All the metrics, all of the data, it looked the same, but it was worse. It was the same trend, but much more accentuated.
She believes that during this time that emergency governance started to normalize a style of decision-making that privileged safety over openness and compliance over judgment.
I spend more and more of my time interpreting policies for applicants, and that became more and more complicated. The quality of the work and the ability to make any piece of work as you see fit started to become secondary.
What changed was not the rhetoric of freedom, but the tolerance for ambiguity. Artistic risk, once implicit, now required administrative justifications. Like the Hays Code, decisions once guided by creative judgment were being rerouted through governance.
You're starting to not only talk to them about legal requirements, but you're starting to curate organisations' programmes, and that sometimes became quite uncomfortable.
The result wasn't repression, it was mitigation.
The biggest thing that happens is people cancel themselves. They self-censor. And it's not even about the opinion, it's just a license to bully.
Once formalised, classification becomes the mechanism.
We are free to make art as we want to make it. The idea that we're actually free to make and see what we like, even that has got lost. They've got into a hierarchy of protected characteristics, so you just inevitably end up with a blind spot.
Fahmy's story is not about ideology, it's about how institutional caution hardens into policy and how that policy lands in people's lives.
These frameworks, it's having unintended consequences that are also putting limits on artistic freedom. It's like contracting out your compliance. That's a structural issue that is having a freezing effect on artistic freedom. I've seen repressive cultures and they're not great. So I value being able to speak freely.
Yet her battle is not theatrical. It's about pushing back against the irrational.
They're starting to lose that relationship with the funder because the funder keeps telling them to change what they're doing, to change the art. That's not why arts organisations were set up.
It's all about a refusal to confuse measurement with meaning, the reduction of art to corporate containment instead of how art acts as a witness, how it tests the limits of what can be said before governance decides what is comfortable to hear.
Our main role is to support artists and to support institutions, to resist boycotts. It's all a kind of interlocked ecology of different pressures, but we can't just use legal warfare to combat it. We've also got to encourage a shift in the culture to be more permissive, to be more tolerant. The word diverse starts to be an indicator of quality, and it isn't.
If Denise Fahmy shows us how institutions proactively move to classify culture before it's defined, some voices move before legitimacy is ever assigned.
My name is Aja Monet. I'm a poet.
In South Florida, the civic terrain is shaped less by resistance and more by restriction. Protest is increasingly bound by permit and legal exposure. Aja Monet once lived here. She watched how language was reclassified, how a poem becomes a risk, a book a violation.
I'm experiencing the world a certain kind of way, and I'm investigating those experiences, and I'm trying to be sincere and true and authentic to it.
Above all, Aja Monet is simply interested in clarity. Her poems are bearings in a world shaped by the pressure to appear sincere.
The byproduct tends to be good if the process is true. Like, a great musician is not a great musician because you like their song. It's because they've gone to a place in themselves that has transformed them. And in that process, they become somebody that people respect and admire because people recognize real. You can't fake the funk.
For her, poetry holds what institutions cannot name because her work is driven by context.
Language is a way of arranging the world around us. It's an attempt to find meaning. When they talk about Black poetry, they delineate it as if it's not poetry. So they do these things where they add other titles to it and kind of make it into something else. So if you speak well, right, they call you a spoken word poet.
Raised in Brooklyn, politicized through witness, Monet learned from an early age that survival depended on naming what others tried to avoid.
I'm not trying to make anybody anything. I think I'm just reflecting what I'm aware of.
She attended Pentecostal church and saw how the spoken word did not just entertain, it organized feelings too.
In all honesty, poetry is an oral tradition inherently. It starts and began that way. So spoken word and slam poetry became the name of the game, when really it was never an articulate expression of what we were doing. It was just a failure of political imagination, just a lack of understanding and context of other cultures.
In Miami in 2016, she co-founded Smoke Signal Studios, a Barter-based cultural space built on hearing what others have to say and mutual recognition.
I don't think I can move somewhere where I'm not being welcomed. It's a real uphill battle without community. The reciprocity is really the name of the game.
Because for Monet, solidarity is not a stance, it's a way of being.
Going to Palestine definitely made me more militant about my visions and my craft and my relationships. A huge part of my experience was just bearing witness. There's still a lot that I'm processing from it. But when we came back, there was a real demand on the movement to include Palestine in our conversation and in our liberation struggle.
But she's wary of how the algorithm rewards visibility versus substance.
The internet is just an amalgamation of a lot of noise, but real connection comes from shared expression and community with people and relating through that community and being curious. I think when you have to face someone face to face, you have to lean into the curiosity.
What she offers instead is continuity, a poem not as a campaign, but as a record of presence, bringing together what official histories often omit.
If you're going to talk about my work, then you have to look into the surrealists, the negritude poets, the poets of the African diaspora and what they were trying to accomplish within the literary political imagination. And the story of the transatlantic slave trade is a huge part of our narrative, but blues is like the origin. So it's very important to understand the context of what I'm doing with language and what I see a poem to be or to do.
The thread is what gets lost when human need is reorganized as value.
The capitalist model has permeated through every part of society, and most distinguishedly within the interpersonal, intimate relationship among people. So things have become product-driven or capital-driven, profit-driven. So that's not what's going to change the conditions of what we see and what's happening.
And it's under conditions like these where meaning gets forgotten.
It's just so fascinating to me. I always say this, that we've spent so much time on technology, on our technological advances and devices, that we have yet to actually upgrade the human heart, to upgrade the spirit, to bring about new software for the internal landscape that we share, that we commune among.
Poetry does not change material conditions on its own, but no movement endures without it because it carries the record.
There are certain spiritual laws that are not man-made and cannot be man-made. And as you move through life, you learn what those laws are because they're intuitive to you. You're born with them. And a lot of life is really about remembering. It's about recollecting and not letting this simulation of this experience get the best of you or take you out of character, take you out of your alignment. And you have to ask yourself on a day-to-day basis, am I moving from love or fear?
Punk was not the beginning of protest. It was one moment when the rules of permission were exposed, when dissent spoke in a language that didn't wait to be authorized.
It was instantly transformative.
What followed was clarification. People learned what could be said and how quickly it could be classified. Punk made that tension visible, the same way that artists like Monet can still find space for language to breathe today.
People always have the opportunity to disrupt and create new stories, new narratives. But some people are bent on very old, outdated ways of seeing. And that's why we're here to disrupt it with new ways of saying, because we've always seen outside of their seeing.
This episode of Destroy was written and produced by Be Right Back Studios. Music was composed by Tokyo Iconic. My name is Richard Smith. Thank you for listening. My name is Richard Smith, and I'm your host. I'm a filmmaker and art director, and once upon a time I was part of the big 80s. I designed record covers for Depeche Mode, I danced with Bono, discussed art with Mick Jagger, and drank tea with Susie Sue. I also grew up during those turbulent times in England in the late 70s and was driven by the do-it-yourself ethos of punk. I obsessed over bands like Joy Division and New Order and went on to work for the album cover designer Peter Saville. I believe that year, that moment in 1976, when a bunch of foul-mouthed yobs cursed and swore on national television, changed the future of culture forever, and is what brought us to where we are today. So where do we go from here? Will emerging new technologies be the catalyst that tears down the walls of mediocrity, throwing culture and society into chaos and revolution again? We'll have to wait and see. Destroy is a Be Right Back Studios production. Learn more at BeRightBackStudios.com. And please tune in again for another episode of Destroy, the Influence of Punk podcast, wherever you listen or download. Be right back. The archival audio used in this episode of Destroy is taken from a variety of unknown sources. Every effort has been made to use these clips responsibly concerning their original creators for the purpose of education, commentary, and tribute. All rights remain with the original rights holders.